And now that we are done with the UFC 311 title fight discussions, we will transition into the rest of the card, and it starts in the featured bout of the evening where we saw two former light heavyweight champions square off against one another. The number 2 ranked Jiri Prochazka finishes the number 3 ranked Jamahal Hill, but it did not come easy. If it wasn't for the absolutely high-level mixed martial arts display in the co-main event between Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov, Jiri Prochazka and Jamahal Hill would have been a shoo-in for the Fight of the Night award. Some would even say, including maybe myself, that it should have still been the Fight of the Night, because whilst we saw an absolute chess match in the co-main event over the course of 25 minutes with championship gold on the line, in this fight here for nearly 15 minutes, 13 minutes and 1 second to be exact, we saw a absolute blood and guts, rock'em sock'em robots battle between Jiri Prochazka and Jamahal Hill, something that these two are not strangers to. We've seen Jiri be in firefights with a plethora of opponents such as Glover Teixeira, such as Alexander Rakic at UFC 300, such as his insane fight with Dominic Reyes in 2021. And the same can be said for Hill, who's went into the 4th rounds against the likes of Thiago Santos. He's went the full 25 minutes in a title fight war with Glover Teixeira. He's been there and done that as well. But these two had never crossed paths with one another until UFC 311 Fight Week, and oh my, did it deliver. Huge moments in this fight, back and forth for both fighters throughout the 1st and 2nd round and into the 3rd round, but Jamahal Hill would wilt under the unrelenting pressure and wacky style that Jiri Prochazka always presents, leading to the TKO finish 3 minutes and 1 second into the 3rd and final round. And heading into this fight, you would have thought it's a pretty clear-cut number 1 contendership matchup. I believe I even said as such in the preview discussions on Friday. However, in hindsight, I feel like it was more of a number 1 contender fight if Jamahal Hill had won, but for Jiri, being that he is the victor coming out on the back end of UFC 311, does he really solidify himself as the next number 1 contender when his only 2 losses in the UFC are to the current champion of the world at 205 pounds, Alex Pereira? Both of them were in championship opportunities, and both of them were by 2nd round knockout. Now, we did learn during the UFC 311 broadcast that Alex Pereira will be making his next title defense at UFC 313 in March against the current number 1 contender, who's on a 13-fight unbeaten streak, Magomed Ankalaev. So it is safe to say that if Magomed Ankalaev gets the victory that night over Alex Pereira and becomes the new champion, that Jiri Prochazka would then be the true number 1 contender, dependent upon if Alex Pereira plans to stay at 205 pounds, because after defending for 3 times, it is pretty obvious he would get an immediate rematch against Ankalaev, barring something really crazy in their fight. But I foresee Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight when the time comes that he does lose, if he ever loses, in this 205-pound weight class. So, should Alex Pereira be defeated by Ankalaev at UFC 313, I foresee him going up to heavyweight to finish off 2025 and finish off his career, which would then slide in Jiri Prochazka as the number 1 contender for Magomed Ankalaev's first title defense, a fight that is fresh and has not happened yet before. However, if Alex Pereira successfully defends for the 4th time against Magomed Ankalaev and remains the 205-pound champion and stays in the weight class, that is where things get a little bit murky for Jiri Prochazka. One other fight that is currently booked right now that we know of, happening in March at UFC London in this weight class, is the former champion and number 4 ranked Jan Blachowicz taking on the number 6 ranked surging Carlos Alberg, who I believe has tallied off 7 consecutive victories. So maybe Jiri will get the winner of Blachowicz versus Alberg in a true number 1 contendership fight. That way we can say Jiri has cracked off 2 straight victories. Jan Blachowicz could get a potential rematch with Alex Pereira. Alberg could get one more win over a former champion and then solidify himself as the next guy up. There are definitely some pieces and dominoes that have to fall for Jiri Prochazka in order for us to talk about his very next matchup and what his near future holds in 2025. But for now, get some rest because you have earned it, my friend. My hat is off to Jiri Prochazka, and my hat is off to Jamahal Hill as well. This was an absolute war. And may I just add one thing here for Jamahal Hill? What could be next for him after this loss to Jiri? I think we get the fight that we were supposed to see at UFC 303 in 2024, Jamahal Hill versus Khalil Rountree. Both of them coming off of losses. Khalil Rountree lost in October at UFC 307 to Alex Pereira in a title fight, and obviously we know Jamahal Hill, prior to this loss to Jiri, was coming off of his loss to Alex Pereira in a title fight as well. So be sure to let me know in the comments below what you think is next for the light heavyweight division, with the title fight being booked in March, with this fight between Jiri and Jamahal, with Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Alberg happening in March. At least everything is happening close together. The timeline should line up regardless of how the pieces go. Next up, we will go to the heavyweight division, where we saw the number 6 ranked Jailton Almeida take on the number 7 ranked Serghei Spivac, and Almeida has extended his win streak to 2. The 33-year-old Almeida extended his record to 22-3 overall, with 21 of those victories by way of finish, as he stopped Serghei Spivac via TKO 4 minutes and 53 seconds into the first round. He is now 8-1 in the UFC since joining the promotion back in February of 2022, following his stint on the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. And he is stacking up quite the resume at heavyweight, with wins over Shamil Abdurrahimov, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Derek Lewis, Alexander Romanov, and now Serghei Spivac, and he finds himself more than likely one win away from a title shot. We know that his only loss in the organization came last March at UFC 299, where it was a TKO finish by the hands of Curtis Blades early in the second round of their fight. But let us not forget that in the first round, Jailton Almeida had his way with Blades, taking him down close to 10 times. And I believe that Almeida had the perfect call out in the UFC 311 aftermath, as he called for a fight with the number 2 ranked Ciryl Gane, the former interim champion. He is coming off of a victory, his second as a matter of fact, over Alexander Volkov back at UFC 310, but that did not come without some controversy, as a lot of people threw out the R word, the oh so coveted robbery. I myself may have even agreed, because I felt that Alexander Volkov should have got the nod over Ciryl Gane and made his win streak, I believe, 5 or 6, but instead he took the loss. Gane gets the win, holds his spot at number 2, but after that controversy and after the performance in general, I do not believe Gane should be next for a title. We know that also the title discussion right now is up in the air, because Jon Jones defended in November at UFC 309 against Stipe Miocic. Tom Aspinall defended his interim title in July over Curtis Blades. Those two are on a collision course in what I hope to be the biggest fight in heavyweight history and the biggest fight of 2025. It is absolutely at the top of my list for anticipated bouts this year. So in the meantime, while we await what's going to happen with Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, which I believe will happen at International Fight Week this year, which is usually in early July, I think we do Ciryl Gane versus Jailton Almeida. Almeida on a 2-fight win streak, Gane on a win streak now in his own right. Put those two together in a true number 1 contendership bout, number 2 versus number 6. The winner gets the winner of, hopefully, Jones versus Aspinall, and probably 2026. And opening up the main card was the middleweight bout between Reinier De Ridder and Kevin Holland, and Reinier De Ridder would make good on his second UFC outing and now improve to 2-0 in the organization, as he would absolutely run through Kevin Holland like a hot knife through butter and submit him 3 minutes and 31 seconds into the opening round. Going into this fight, I felt very confident in the ability of Kevin Holland to get the nod here and get the victory over Reinier De Ridder, who I believe did not look all that great in his UFC debut back in November against Gerald Meerschaert. But oh boy was I proved wrong, because De Ridder made this look easy, much easier than his first fight in the UFC against GM3. He landed one strike against Kevin Holland that got him defensive and immediately planted the takedown behind it, took him down, got top control, and finished the fight with a rear naked choke after taking the back. We know how highly accredited the skills on the grappling realm and jiu-jitsu realm of De Ridder are, and he put them on full display here on a pay-per-view card, the first of 2025. I think after this type of performance, he will be catapulted up the ranks in this middleweight division, being that he is a former 2-weight world champion in one. He's 34 years old, so right on the outside of his prime years, 19-2 with 17 finishes, and 13 of those finishes are by way of submission. He's going to be in some very fun fights for as long as we have him in the UFC. Let's take a quick look at the back half of the middleweight rankings and some potential next matchups. matchups. We know that Shara Magomedov is scheduled to face Michael Venom Page. That is February 1st at UFC Saudi Arabia. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez is scheduled to take on Brendan Allen in UFC Seattle February 22nd. So that leaves us with the number 13 ranked Jack Hermanson, the number 15 ranked Michel Pereira, and the number 11 ranked Paulo Costa. And I guess if we want to get him all the way up to number 10, it's Roman Dolidze. I think any of those four names make perfect sense for a next matchup and a progressive step forward for Reinier De Ridder. I think honestly a fight with the number 10 ranked Dolidze would be really intriguing, as Dolidze is known for his grappling and wrestling as well. Very strong, physical guy. You know what? I think I talked myself into it. Let's give Reinier De Ridder a shot to enter the top 10 in his third UFC bout against Roman Dolidze. In the prelim headliner, we saw the biggest upset of 2025 so far through the first two cards of the year, and that was Raoni Barcelos defeating Payton Talbott and handing him the first loss of his professional career. The 37-year-old Barcelos now finds himself on a two-fight win streak with wins over Payton Talbott at UFC 311, and in February of last year, a submission over Christian Quinones. At 37 years old, 19-5, this man can still get it done, and I talked about on Friday how he has welcomed prospects like Payton Talbott into big spots before. He's faced Kyler Phillips. He's faced Umar Nurmagomedov. He's faced Saeed Nurmagomedov. He's never strayed away from a tough battle against a younger prospect. And this fight was honestly all Barcelos here, outside of a few moments where the fight would get back to the feet and Talbott would land some crisp shots. The takedown defense was just not there. Talbott was not able to answer the call. And truthfully, I just feel like the experience that Barcelos had going into this fight is what paid biggest dividends here. He took Payton down at will. He was able to hold top control, threaten with submissions. This was just a really, really good fight, but never really a true moment where Talbott was close to victory. But for what it's worth, Talbott did have to go through the fire here, go through the adversity, and I mentioned that in the preview as well. Every time we get these undefeated young prospects that have made it look easy so far, we want to see them tested at one point or another, and this was that opportunity for Talbott, who is only 26 years old, and this was only his 10th professional fight. He will learn from this, he will get better from this, and I undoubtedly believe that he will be a player in this bantamweight division for many years to come. We saw Azamat Bekoev, the LFA champion, come in on short notice this week and replace Serghei Spivac to take on Zachary Reese, and oh my word, this guy has immediately thrown himself into the talks of potential top 15 territory in this middleweight division. He is now 19-3. He has 15 finishes, and he disposed of Zachary Reese in just 3 minutes and 4 seconds with a brutal ground and pound knockout. He has not lost a fight since September of 2021 and finds himself on a 6-fight win streak overall. While I'm not going to immediately matchmake him with a top 15 opponent next, I think it's safe to say, given his credibility being an LFA champion, entering into the UFC in his short notice debut and taking on someone that is dangerous like Zachary Reese, believe had finished 7 of his 8 professional wins heading into this bout, that says a lot about Azamat, who is 29 years old, entering his prime right now. Man, what an opportunity that he seized at UFC 311. He's going to be a talking point throughout the remainder of 2025. I could maybe even see him being the Rookie of the Year. Bogdan Guskov held his spot in the light heavyweight rankings at number 13 by getting rid of the short notice replacement, Billy Elekana. A lot of short notice madness for UFC 311. We saw Billy enter this fight literally over the past week or so, taking place of Johnny Walker, a longtime ranked fighter in this 205-pound division. Billy was a 2-fight PFL veteran, and I think given the show that he put on against Guskov here, nearly finishing him in the first round, he earned himself a couple more fights in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. But Guskov was able to take advantage of the short notice aspect of this fight, as you could see Elekana start to fade into that second round, which led to the submission 3 minutes and 33 seconds in. Guskov is now 3-1 in the UFC with 3 straight victories after his debut fight in the promotion, where he fought Volkan Oezdemir in September of 2023 and got submitted. He's had 3 straight victories, 3 straight finishes. He's number 13 right now, and I think we just put him with who he was supposed to fight at UFC 311, Johnny Walker. Now, I know it's an apparent pretty serious injury for Walker, so if he's going to be sidelined for the remainder of 2025, then we can take a look at some of the rest of the division, the Dominic Reyes's of the world, a Nikita Krylov matchup, an Azamat Murzakanov, any type of those where Bogdan can work his way up this 205-pound division, I think makes sense, and it's always going to be a fun fight because Guskov has 17 victories and 17 finishes. And I want to touch on 2 more ranked matchups before we head on out of here today. We go to the women's bantamweight division where we saw the number 13 ranked Ailin Perez get the biggest win of her UFC career, extend her win streak to 5 in a row, and she did that with a very convincing decision over the number 9 ranked Karol Rosa. Ailin Perez is exactly what this women's bantamweight division needs. It is a fresh face, it is fresh blood, and it is a personality, and pair that all with winning fights. She is 12-2 overall, has finished half of her wins, 30 years old, so right in her prime, and she will now be in the top 10 of this division that has been stale for a very long time, really since we saw Amanda Nunes hang up the gloves, and some would say even before that. We need moving pieces, we need activity out of these ladies, and that is what we are seeing for Ailin Perez, who has fought 6 times since her debut in September of 2022. Come Tuesday morning, she will likely take that number 9 ranking away from Karol Rosa. We know that Holly Holm has been granted her release from the UFC. She was ranked number 8, so I truly think she's probably going to take that number 8 spot come Tuesday, which means she's likely only 1 win away from a title fight, depending on who the UFC decides to book her against. If they just do like 1 spot ahead, then that changes things. But if you look at the division, Juliana Pena dethroned Raquel Pennington to become the new champion. We know that she's pretty much on a collision course with Kayla Harrison, who is 2-0 since making her way over to the UFC. And then in February, I believe it's at UFC Seattle, if I'm not mistaken, we have the number 3 ranked Ketlin Vieira taking on the number 4 ranked Macy Chasson. So you could say that that's the next number 1 contendership bout. The winner of that takes on the winner of Harrison versus Pena. Things could get a little bit weird if Vieira wins and Harrison wins because they literally just fought. But we'll worry about that when we get there. So with all of that seeming to take place, Mayra Bueno Silva is set to go down to flyweight and take on Jasmine Jasudavicius. That leaves Irene Aldana, Norma Dumont, and Raquel Pennington as the 3 potential names that could be next for Ailin Perez. To be honest with you, I could see her going up against any of those fighters and even getting a victory. I'm curious to know what you think about Ailin Perez's potential ceiling in this women's bantamweight division, and let me know what you think is next as well. And last but not least, in the flyweight division, we saw the number 11 ranked Tagir Ulanbekov hold his spot in the flyweight ranks by giving Clayton Carpenter the first loss of his career. As a matter of fact, I saw that all 4 undefeated fighters heading into this UFC 311 card lost. Clayton Carpenter was 8-0, Umar Nurmagomedov was 18-0, Payton Talbott was 9-0, and Rinya Nakamura was also 9-0. What a parlay that would have been, by the way. But tangent aside, let's come back to this flyweight division because Tagir Ulanbekov is 16-2. He's 33 years old, in his prime. He's won 3 consecutive fights, and dating back to his UFC debut in 2020, he is 5-1 overall. The only loss is to Tim Elliott, a former title challenger. And with Alexandre Pantoja becoming a borderline dominant champion in this division, Tagir could make his way up the ranks pretty quickly, if you ask me. It seems as though Kai Kara France will get the next crack at the title against Alexandre Pantoja. We know that Brandon Royval and Brandon Moreno are still up at the top of this division as well. Amir Albazi is still there. Manel Kopp is making a huge name for himself. Tatsuro Taira is coming off of his first professional loss. There's a lot of movement happening in this flyweight division, which is incredible. Now, where can we fit Tagir Ulanbekov amongst those discussions in the title talks? I think a potential fight with him and former former title challenger Steve Erceg would be very fun. I may be blanking off the top of my head if Erceg is booked at the moment. We have someone like a Tatsuro Taira who's coming off of that previously mentioned first pro loss. I think that would actually be a very fun fight because Taira is an elite level grappler. Ulanbekov is known for his wrestling and grappling, being from the Khabib Nurmagomedov camp. I think I talked myself into that one too, like I talked myself into a matchup earlier. Let's do Tagir Ulanbekov, who's currently number 11 before Tuesday morning, against the current number 5 ranked Tatsuro Taira next. So that is it for UFC 311. Please be sure to let me know in the comments below all of your thoughts and your takeaways from this card, from the title fights to the opening fight of the evening. This turned out to be a damn good night of fights, and back-to-back really good fight nights if you ask me for the UFC's 2025 slate. We have this upcoming weekend off, but then we travel to UFC Saudi Arabia with Israel Adesanya taking on Nassourdine Imavov, Shara Bullet versus Michael Venom Page. We have Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Sergey Pavlovich and more. Then we go to Australia for 2 title fights. Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland, Zhang Wei Li, Tatiana Suarez. Oh my goodness, after this week off for the UFC, it feels like we're going to really hit our gears as we transition out of the winter time and into the springtime. We talked about UFC 313's fight announcements and UFC 314 as well. If you haven't heard about those, you can check that video out here on the channel. And while you're there, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe because every single week I recap the most meaningful results from every card. I preview the best fights heading into each weekend with the X's and O's, and more importantly to me, the storylines and what is at stake, and I give my thoughts on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA, and you can follow along on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where podcast episodes release there every Monday and Friday. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.